But now we're going to start on Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis with Amar Le Rava. Right, Rava at the end of Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph turns to Rav Chisda and he says, "Shnayim shloshim makomos." How can you tell me that if there are berries in 2 or 3 places, these are black berries that stand out on a hadas, it's kosher? Havi menumaru pasuk. Now the word menumar in its root is referring to a leopard. If I got that right? Which is the one that has the speckles. What's that called? Is that a leopard?
Yeah, leopard.
Okay, got it right. Okay. All right, leopard has spots. I remember we used to read you remember that book that we used to read to our kids? Go up and down. Anyway. So menumar, which is halach in Sefer Torah, it's halach in many different cases, means that it's speckled. And we always assume that something that's speckled is not so pretty. And therefore, in the case of a hadas that has berries here, berries there, berries there, which Rav seems to assume is kosher, Rav says it should be possible. It's not hadar, right? Creates hadar, and we're assuming creates hadar in esrog is requirement in all daled minim. This hadas is lacking in hadar because it's speckled. O shahayu anovim meruba me'olav pasul. Omar Rav Chisda davar zeh Rabbeinu HaGadol Omar ve'hamoku yeh so lo shanu ela nov of shchoros, aval nov of yerukos. Mine da'adasim v'kosher. The distinction that we attribute to in this context to Rav is not between where the berries are concentrated. If they wherever they are, if the rov berries, rov anov, yosem me'olav, then it's possible. But the distinction is between blackberries and green berries. Green berries do not upset hadar because they sort of are camouflaged in the green hadas. Omar papa dumos kishchoros damien. If you have red berries, they have the same status as blackberries. How does Rav Papa know this? And this I don't have an answer to. He derives it from dam nida. Yomer of Kanina, hi dam shachar adam mula shalok. When you have blood and it looks black in color, you know that it's red, and with the passage of time, it became black. And therefore, she's tamei tumas nida. What does that have to do with the color of berries? Listen, I don't know. Ask a scientist. If I can prove to you from the anatomy or the physics of blood that blood that's black used to be red, therefore berries that are red used to be black, or blackberries used to be red, I should say that way. I don't know. Take it or leave it. I couldn't figure this out. This really requires a lot more luggage. This is not. The Gemara is not here saying something about the mitzvahs. I don't believe so for a minute. Anyway, in miaton kosher, the Mishnah says that if you take off the berries, it's kosher. What do you mean you take off the berries, it's kosher? It's possible. Don't we hold yesh bichu on mitzvahs? Dimatinu emas. Well, let's try to think about it. Was there really a bichu? When did he remove the berries? You have hadas sitting on the table. It has no status in halacha until you put it together as hoshana. If it was full of berries before you even put it together, that's called kami diogdom. Then that's not bichu. Bichu means a chefetz shel mitzvah that was possible. Here it's not a chefetz shel mitzvah. You didn't even designate it as a chefetz shel mitzvah. It's just hadas in nature. Shika for sure. I don't need the Mishnah to tell me that if he took off the berries before he did the agad, that the hadas is kosher. It's obvious that it's kosher. So we're going to have to assume that it was already designated as a chefetz shel mitzvah. You did the agad, and at this point, take a look at the hadas. It's got mostly what? Berries, and therefore it's possible. Well, if that be the case, from the moment it was placed into the Hoshana and bundled up together, it was rejected. Is tifshamine dochli me karal avi dochli. Again, I can't prove to you that roy v'nidche v'roy is kosher, but I can prove to you that if it was nidche me karal and then it became roy, then it's kosher. So we're halfway there. And if you remember Rabbi Yirmiyah on Amud Aleph, he was vacillating back and forth about a case of dochli mei kara. So at least Rabbi Yirmiyah's suffix, we could be poshe. We don't have a clear-cut answer to the question of nireh, v'nidche, v'nireh, but we do have an answer to the question of dochli mei kara. Mar says, no. Li olam basar diagd. The Mishnah is talking about a case where he first set up the hadas together, binding it together with the lulav and the aravas in a hoshana, and there were too many berries. So now you'll ask me, well, then it was dachli. The moment that you put it into the agah and designated it for the mitzvah, it was already rov anovov. It was dachli. A savar eged hasmona bi'alma, hasmona bi'alma lav klum. The Torah doesn't set up a chefetz shel mitzvah simply because you decided to designate it as such. You have to do an action which changes the object and makes it into a chefetz shel mitzvah. But agad, if you hold lulav ein tzarich agad, is hasmona bi'alma. Hasmona bi'alma means it's not a significant action. It's nothing more than words. It's diburim bi'alma. It's as if you said, "Oh, I'm going to use this hadas for the mitzvah." That's worthless.
So when does it become a
talk is cheap?
So when does the hadas mitzvah? This according to
right. According to this man, at what point in time? One second, let me digest this again. What point in time? So now I have to figure out, are we talking before Yontif or on? 1 second, give me a minute. I'm going to tell you the answer, but the only trouble is this is being recorded. So I should have to record it because I'm not sure if my answer is correct. I think we're talking about Erev Yontif now. Yeah. Right. The Gemara is saying, I hope I'm, again, it's complicated sugya, but we're talking about bundling it up on Erev Yontif. The Gemara is saying Hasmona Lav Milsa, and therefore it's not Dochui. It's not Dochui. Because Hasmona Lav Milsa, right? But with the emergence of Yontif, then it would be Dochui. But that we don't know. We only know after Ag. Ein mematim b'yontif. The Gemara asks the following question: Ha'ovar v'likton mai. Okay, he wasn't allowed on Yontif to remove the berries. Why? That's called nira k'mesakein mon. Are you familiar with that? One of the 39 malachas on Shabbos and Yontif is called makeh v'patish. The rabbinic phrase or terminology for makeh v'patish is called tikkun mon. Right? So let's say I have a utensil. Right now it's non-functional. If I would do something to change this utensil on Yontif or on Shabbos, then that's called tikkun mon. I made it function. And that's a violation of makeh v'patish. So that's called mesakein mon. Now here, he didn't really change the hadas in any profound way. He just removed berries. But since halachically, the status of the hadas has now changed when he removes the blackberries. That's called nira k'mesakein mon. Midrabanan, it looks like he's fixing up something. And therefore it comes under the broader sense of tikkun mon. But the Mishnah is saying you're not allowed to do so, implying that if he did so, then it would be what? It would be kosher. That's the way the Gemara is medayek from the Mishnah. He should not have done so, but if he went and he did so, the adas is kosher. Again, you could ask a different question here. I don't want to get off on tangent about mitzvah baba avera. Yeah, it's an avera because he's not allowed to take off the berries on Yom. Okay, so the Gemara says, the Ashur Amos. Right? At what point were these berries, did they turn black? If they were black before Yontif, is then Dichui Mei Kara. How could you say that if he on Yontif he removed the berries, he's machshir, it was already Dachui? Because before Yontif he was already rejected. Again, you have to know whether he did an agad and so forth. Is Tifsha B'nei Dachui Mei Kara Lo Avi Dachui? Elalav the Achshor B'Yontif. Notice they were green when he went into Yontif. They became black on Yontif. Is then I can even go a step further, says the Gemara. I can derive an even more far-reaching conclusion. Nirev and Nidcha. As we entered into Yontif, it was Nirev. It was royal mitzvahs. Because the berries were green. And now they became black. And now he removes the berries. Ishmael, we have to derive from this in the diuk of our Mishnah, Nirev and Nidcha Chozim and Nirev. And this is the most extreme position on Dichli Eitzel Mitzvahs. And we're saying aim Dichli Eitzel Mitzvahs, even in the case of Nira Vinidcha. Lo Leolam the Ashkur Mei Kara. The berries were always black, even before Yont. Is Dachi Mei Kara Delavi Dachi Tifsho. So we can go halfway. We can derive the conclusion that in a case of Dachi Meikara, that's not considered Dachi. Aval, but you should know that Nira v'nidcha choser v'nira lo tifsha. You cannot derive any conclusions about a case where they're originally green when we went into Yontif, they became black on Yontif, and then he plucked them off. That would be Nira v'nidcha v'choser v'nira. I don't know what the status would be in such a case. By the way, you should know the Rambam seems to paskin, like Rav Papa back on Amud Aleph, that ain't dichli on mitzvahs, even lekula, and he doesn't make any qualification. It's a long literature there. Toner Rabbanon and ain mematim beyond to be sure. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon Amru mematim. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon says you're allowed to pluck off the berries on Yontiv. So the Gemara asks for hakam atake mon of Yontiv. Right, he's repairing a utensil on Yontiv. Rav Ashi Kigon Shalakatan La'achila. He's interested in eating the berries. And that's called Melechet Sochel Nefesh, and that's mutter on Yontiv. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon, Savala Kavua di Omar, Dover Shein Miskavi Mutter. And Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Shimon, accepted his father's shita. Rabbi Shimon is famous for saying Dover Shein Miskavi Mutter, meaning even though he is being machshir, what? The hadas. But nevertheless, his kavanah, his intention was for achila purposes. So as a result of plucking the anavim for achila, he was machshir the hadas, and he was misakin money. That's called a davar she'eino miskavin, like the case where he's carrying heavy benches in soft ground, and he makes furrows in the ground. And Rav Shimon says that's mut. But the Gemara asks for Abayvi, the Rav, the Amrit Shavai, Moder Rav Shimon, Secration of Yomis. Even Rav Shimon, who holds Davar She'eino Miskavin, is mutter. That's only because it's not a psikration. Psikration means we know the consequence. So, for example, you chop off the head of a chicken, you know it's going to die, and therefore that's called Matil's Nisham. You can't tell me when I'm only interested in taking the head. Here too, once he takes off the berries, you can't tell me he's not interested in being machshir the hadas. For sure he's being machshir the hadas.
Child.
Who's the child?
They said the child wants to eat the berries.
Yeah, no, we're talking about an adult. It's also eat berries. They're very tasty, these berries. Ochamai Askina, the Gemara answers the Islay Shana Chriti. He has other hadasim. He doesn't need this hadas. But what is the Gemara answering? I mean, it's still a separation. He's being machshad hadas. So this is called in the language. Have you ever heard of this? It's called psikresha de lo nichole. That means that you don't gain anything from the repercussions. Like, for example, let's say you were carrying heavy benches in very moist ground and you made furrow, but you're not a farmer. You have no interest in seeding the ground. So even though it's a psikresha, Reb Shimon still holds that it's a davar she'ein miskaven and it's mutter. Psikresha lo nichol.
Doesn't give benefit
At all, because he has other hadassim. He's got a great supply of hadassim in his fridge. He doesn't need an extra hadas. Even though he was misakin hadas, and it's a psikresha that he's misakin hadas by removing its berries, but nevertheless it's lo nichol. He gets no benefit.
so therefore it's mutter.
And therefore it's mutter according to Rav Shimon. We learned in the Brisa, Hutar Agdo Biyantiv. If let's say you have a Hoshana, which is made up of a lulav, hadassim, and aravos, and the bundle came apart on Yontif, Ogdo, he's allowed to rebind it, but only kaguda shel yerek. So he can take out like a very temporary kind of strap, and sort of tie it around. So the Gemara says that in this case, he's not making a kesher. What he does is he ties it around and he tucks the two ends inside, but he doesn't actually tie a knot. So the Gemara says, why do you have to do it in such a slop-chop way? Why can't he make a bow out of it? A bow is not considered a knot. So the Gemara, right? Amani, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, that this particular brisa reflects the shita Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar Aniva Kshira Ma'al Yisrael. Rabbi Yehuda extends the definition of a kesher to include even a bow. A bow is considered a kesher, a knot. So the Gemara asks, Rabbi Yehuda, Eged Ma'al Yisaboy. If Rabbi Yehuda is indeed the author of this brisa, and if he doesn't allow you to make a bow, then how are you going to be yotze the mitzvah by tying something around and tucking in the ends? Rabbi Yehuda requires eged. This is not an eged. The brisa agrees with Rabbi Yehuda that we can't make an aniv on Shabbos because an aniv equals kesher. He violates that malacha. But the author of this brisa never accepted Rabbi Yehuda's requirement of an eged. So he's only really doing this eged for the purpose of what? It's not in order to be yotze the mitzvah of lulav, because this brisa never accepted Rabbi Yehuda's zera shava to agudas eizah. And therefore, there's no requirement of eged. The only reason the Bryce is advocating doing the eged is because of zeh kelim. We have 2 minutes left just to learn the Mishnah. Arava gzula v'yavesha psula. Now we're up to the Mishnah of Arava, and the Gemara again is going to analyze what is an Arava. The Torah doesn't identify it as such. In any event, just like we saw in both lulav and in hadassim, if you steal it, it's invalid for one of two possible reasons. Either it's the first day of Yom Tov and you require lachem, it's not yours, or alternatively, even the balance of Yom Tov because of mitzvah ba'aver shalasherev shalir nitachas sula. This was the principle that we said about kituse mefta shiura, that since it's l'sreifa koi, it was worshipped as an idol or as part of an ira nidachas, and the Torah says you have to burn the entire city, then it's considered as if it was already burned. It doesn't have a shear, and it's disqualified. Niktam rosho, if the top of the arava was cut off, it's possible. Nifritzu olav, the leaves were torn off. Tzaftzafah, okay, we're going to have a long discussion about what a tzaftzafah means. Sula. In fact, I have here in the Masechet a very nice picture of a tzaf. I want to see. Musha, if on the other hand it's not dry, correct? It's not totally dry. We said that Yavesha is Psula, but here it's not totally dry. It's Kamusha. It's beginning to dry. It's withering, but it still has some moisture to it. And it's kosher. Nashu mixas oleh, if only a minority of the leaves fell off the arava. This is so relevant, by the way, because from day 1 to day 2, especially if you have this kaishakluff, so the leaves fall off, and that's why the briskets don't use those kaishak. They die in rain. Okay. So nashu mixas oleh fishel baal sheir. Okay, the discussion about baal will come later on in Mitzvah Hashem. There are 2 different types of fields. There are fields that grow on water. Naturally, there are other fields that need to be irrigated. And we'll see how the willow, the arava changes based on whether it's a stay based on baal or regular sun. So we're going to end now, because we ran out of time, with Tanar Rabbanon, which is 4 lines up before the end of Lamed Gimel Amid Beis. And tomorrow's daf in Mitzvah Hashem is daf Lamed Zav. Wishing you a great day.